Welcome to this live recording at Healers Bible Church, where the order of our lives is glory. God's messenger of hope and agent of glory, Pastor Abraham Great, serves with a prophetic mandate as the senior pastor here at Healers Bible Church to raise a generation of people ready for the coming of Christ. The message you're about to hear has the proclivity to move you into actions. The order of your life is glory.
Let's pray. Father, I just pray that we will have a good time. Not just in each other's company and in your company and presence with us. Help us to learn from one another. Help us to grow in faith and reliance on you. Help us to look to you more and more for our future, our hope, our strength. Lord, we know that we're nothing without you. You are the one who brings all opportunities, all strength, all hope, all future, because there is no future or no hope without you. So just help us to walk humbly with you and to know your ways and to pick up things from one another that might be useful in our walk forward. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Do you want to take your seats? I think I'll launch out with a few things, but I think it's better with this size group to do things as interactively as possible. Yeah, so I'll start off with a few things. Just as you were introducing it, I was thinking, actually, how should I put it? Jesus says in Luke 5:4, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." And of course, when the master says that directly, you can be pretty sure that something good's going to happen. And so it came to pass with Jesus and Simon Peter. The thing is with us that God doesn't give us such clarity most of the time. And as he introduced me, I was reminded of a guy who used to live with us for a while called Dave Bird. He was an entrepreneur in a sort of a rather extreme form. He'd sort of start a business a week. And he reminded me that, thinking of him reminded me that actually the average business, the entrepreneur will have 6 or 7 complete failures before a success, right? Before the one that really blossoms and grows. Yeah, and so you have to be ready for the first one you try not to work out, and you pick yourself up and you have a go at another business and that one falls apart as well, then you pick yourself up and have another go. And actually the key thing and the thing that God uses in terms of developing our character is how we react to the failure, to the thing falling apart. Right? Joseph in Egypt didn't give up. Yeah, and these things happen out multiple times. He got sold into slavery, and then things got better as he became master of his Potiphar's household. But then he fell foul of Potiphar's wife and ended up in prison again. And then he thought he was out again because of the dream he interpreted. And what happened? He stays in prison for a couple more years. So I think one of the things about any of these things, you have to be ready to launch into the deep repeatedly, over and over until it comes together. Dave Bird actually came from Winchester. He came to Milton Keynes because they were just starting to set up those stalls in the city centre, and he actually think he ended up running about 2 or 3 of them. So he got in at the right moment. That's a key feature, right? Get the right timing wrong. The market's mature or whatever, and you don't make a lot of money. You get in right at the outset, and you get the right tactic. It's much more successful. So he set up several of those. Then he decided he was going. I can't remember where he went after us, but he then ended. The last I heard of him, he was ostrich farming in Australia, right? Seriously, and I know that whatever he puts his hand to, God's just given him a gift and a knack, and it will come together. But he went through those stages where he set up these 3 market stalls in Milton Keynes, and one of them really flourished and 2 of them didn't. Right, you have to be ready to just keep sowing the seed and trying the opportunities, and when it does fall apart and you think, well, I'd have been better off saving the money and not investing. Well, no, actually, you've learnt. What you have is the opportunity of the learning from, from each thing. And so I think how we respond in terms of our character and how we respond in terms of learning lessons from things, even the bad investments can be good when you've learnt things that will stand you in good stead for the future. So now, you see, I know most of you, so I was going to give you a little bit of background about myself. I mean, my background was, but I'll keep this very brief. So my background was when I left university, I went to join British Rail as a management trainee, and I spent 20 years sort of working up British Rail, then Railtrack, then Network Rail. Ended up managing nearly 1,000 ground level staff in the West Midlands, sort of south side Northampton, right across to the other side of Wales. And then later on, I was sort of managing sort of commercial contracts for Railtrack and the Network Rail. So I've always been in big business, right? Which ain't really, what you don't start with, sort of, well, let's set up a railway system, right? Have you got a spare 10, 20 billion, sort of to start those things off, So that's why I brought Mark along, because Mark has actually had quite a bit of experience in trying to get things started in small things. So I thought he can tell you some stories, which be a lot more interesting than some of the... I can tell you principles, but he can tell you interesting stories. So for the last few years, I've been, 20 years I've been in church leadership, but I was still working in the secular environment. Then the last 9, I've been leading the church. I have found the skills I learned from the secular environment very valuable and useful in the church environment. So how to make things happen, how to get things done, how to motivate people, how to manage finances well. So I actually do have a little bit of experience in managing small and start-up businesses, but it's mainly in the property area, which is, again, not, it's one where you need quite a lot of money to get started. So, again, not the most helpful. Whereas Mark's done things absolutely from scratch. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, who will tell you what his background is, so where his stories are going to be coming from.
Thank you. Right, yeah. Just give you a bit of kind of background of where my experience kind of comes from. It kind of started around about 4 or so years ago. I was just coming towards, I was in the second half of my first year of university. Basically, and I suppose this sums up kind of first year of uni and how kind of relaxed it can be. I had quite a bit of time on my hands. They weren't really kind of pushing us as maybe they should have done. But yes, I have quite a bit of time on my hands. And so with this, I kind of decided to start up my own kind of company. It was a very kind of simple idea at the time. The basic idea was to kind of buy and sell, well, at the start, video games. So I would kind of go along to car boot sales. I would kind of buy in bulk from shops with simply the aim of kind of buying at a low price, selling on at a profit after the costs you incur. So kind of very simple idea. Started about 4 years ago. At the start, it was kind of making maybe £50 a month. It was kind of a bit of extra income whilst I was at uni. Of course, a lot of uni students fairly broke anyway, so good to earn a bit of extra money then. So that was all nice, and that was kind of relatively kind of comfortable at the time. I then, going into the summer, kind of had 4 months off. You generally have quite long summers at university, and I had about 4 months where I kind of gradually expanded the business to kind of process more items, to kind of process more stock, and kind of grew to kind of earning kind of maybe £250 a month on doing this kind of simple kind of business. So that was all going kind of very well, very nicely. Towards the back end of that summer, so now I'm talking sort of 3.5 years ago, my best friend, still is my best friend, we'll come back to that later, a guy called Martin. He basically owned his own business at the time, kind of business based in Milton Keynes. And he basically came along and asked to kind of be involved in this business to help me expand even further. Now, at the time I was kind of very excited about this. I was, one of the reasons why I started out was to make a bit of extra money, and that extra money was proving very useful, particularly through kind of university years where I didn't have a lot. So I was quite excited about this. So he kind of came on board, and we started to kind of try and expand the business. In one sense, he was kind of just an extra pair of hands, so we could be able to process more and more things. So that was why he came in first of all. As I kind of went through my second year of university, this kind of gradually increased as the months went by, to the point where we eventually started, our lives effectively started overlapping quite a lot. For example, we kind of set up a business bank account together. We, kind of a lot of our finances overlapped in terms of putting money into the business, taking money out. Things were overlapping quite a lot. We'd spend a lot of time together. Our lives were very kind of intertwined. Over kind of the course of my second year of uni, all this kind of grew and grew, and kind of my Martin was very much at the kind of heart of this business along with myself. We got to sort of halfway through my second year of university, so we're now talking just under 3 years ago, and we kind of then came to the conclusion that we were trying to kind of combine the two businesses. So he had his own business, I had this business. We then wanted to kind of create this umbrella company that would kind of incorporate both of these businesses, with the aim of kind of bringing them both together and having this kind of long-term vision going forward on what we wanted to do. Okay, so that kind of gives you a bit of background on kind of where that's all come from. We're going to go into a bit more detail of kind of where that all went later on. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a background. I don't want to go into too much further detail because there's some kind of points and things we want to take out of that. But I think that hopefully that gives you a good kind of indication of where that background comes from.
So his friend's business was actually website development, and Mark's business was computer games, right? And they decided that was going to be one business, and we'll come back to how that worked out or not in a bit. Okay. Our theme's about launching out into the deep, and that application in terms of work life and starting business. And really, the first thing anybody needs to think through is why they're seeking to launch a new business, a new career. You've got to be very clear as to what's the purpose behind it. Why are you doing this? Why are you aiming to make money? So I'm going to hand straight back to Mark, and Mark's going to answer the question. So why did you get into this work? Okay, you said a little bit about the uni, but there's a bit more to it than that, wasn't there?
So I mean, kind of the main reasons. I briefly touched on the kind of the uni and wanted to make a bit more kind of money in it. But kind of the main reason. I mean, I particularly enjoyed the area of finance and kind of making money in that sort of sense. I did economics at uni, so it was a kind of an area I was very much interested in. Like I said, at the start it was really just to kind of get a bit of extra money. But actually it was really something that I was kind of quite passionate about. It was something that was close to my heart, close to kind of my skills, the gifting that kind of God's given me. And it's just something I enjoyed, and the fact that I had the time to do it alongside the uni course was great. Yes, how did the common purpose of the partnership work out? As I was saying before, we kind of got to this point where we expanded the business and wanted to, we actually came up with this 5-year business plan of where we were going to take this big umbrella company that incorporated our 2 businesses, where we were going to take that to. Okay. Now the problem was because our kind of lives were overlapping and intertwined so much, we actually found there were a lot of things that we started to kind of disagree on. So, for example, we'd have so many arguments about kind of who was owed what from the business, whose responsibility it was to put in this money, and who was and take out what money. It all got very complicated and intertwined. And I suppose one of the things that maybe we could have done better is record things a bit better and have more clarity in how we did our business. But it basically all that meant that was my relationship with my best friend, who I would start this business with, really started to deteriorate. It was quite a painful experience at the time, actually. Now I look back on it, to see how such close friends could actually really be split apart because of finance and money issues and these kind of disagreements that we had. So around the same time as that was happening, I was beginning to feel, and maybe this was a byproduct of that, that actually this long-term strategy, this 5-year plan that we had come up with, I realised it's not actually something I wanted to be a part of. I actually wanted to focus more on my uni course and developing a career out of that, and going into employment from that, rather than kind of after uni going on to further this business and take it wherever it could go. So suddenly we kind of had this problem of we'd entered into this 5-year plan and incurred so many costs in terms of starting up a company, because there's so many admin fees and registration fees, all these one-off costs that you have to incur on setting up a company, which was okay if you have a 5-year plan, but suddenly, now that I wanted to kind of out in a couple of months, suddenly the plan and the purpose, it didn't match. So effectively, this effectively led to the downfall of the umbrella company. It's led to the downfall of the company, and because of this mismatch, a lot of time and money was kind of wasted away, and like I said before, a lot of pain in the deterioration of my relationship with my best friend.
Yeah, go for it. Yes, best to ask questions as we go. Yeah, we'll do a whole load more as well at the end, but make it more interesting. But please, if you've got any questions, ask as you go.
Yeah, go for it.
What could you have done to have kept the relationship?
Listen to me.
Unfortunately, he's
What could you have done to keep the business and the friendship, if you could?
Yeah.
Because from the beginning you were quite passionate about the business, and you and your friend were close.
Unfortunately, he's touched on it a little bit. He gave us some advice that we kind of ignored. But I think one of the key things was kind of clarity in terms of recording things, where the money was going, because it got to the point where actually both of us had very different interpretations on where the business was at, who was owed what money. So I think that clarification on and just recording things thoroughly was really key to that, because it led to a lot of disagreements, a lot of arguments within the business.
So for example, one of them was providing most of the finance. The other was providing most of the time. Right? So if it was just finance and you were, it was 60-40, then it might be obvious that the business might be 60-40. right? But if one is doing most of the money and the other doing most of the time, does that mean it's 50-50 or not? Okay, so, and it was the lack of clarity as to what the deal is, right? So actually what they didn't do was they drifted into it and they didn't plan it properly, right? Actually, my view after the event was this was money well invested. If Mark learnt some lessons from this with small number of thousands of pounds, then that will save him from making those sort of foul ups with tens of thousands of pounds. Okay, so I'm very happy for money to be lost in that sort of way, as long as people learn the lessons. Right? If you learn the lessons, so you're not going to make that mistake again, and then as God gives you more resources, you're acting on a bigger scale. So now he's got a house, partly made possible not because he's made so much money, but because he's got a wealthy grandmother who gave him a rather large deposit. Yeah. But the thing is, when she does that, then actually he's got the opportunity to foul up with rather bigger sums of money than just, his own sort of, yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate that, I think, a lot of that, you could actually argue a lot of the profit that we made, that I made throughout the whole kind of few years that I did it, was actually lost in terms of the fees that I get, the accountancy fees, all these fees from having this long-term plan. And so the actual money I made overall maybe wasn't that much. And actually you could argue that in terms of the amount of time I put in, was it worth it? But in terms of the lessons that I learnt, in terms of dealing with people, dealing with my best friend, and dealing with relationships within business, as well as the financial things I learned as well, it was definitely worth it. The time and money that kind of put into that, no doubt.
So I think there are three lessons. One's about that clarity, right? The second one that Mark's already said is about recording things. The third one, actually, I think in that area is about not running ahead of yourself, right? So let's say you're thinking of, I don't know, let's say a taxi type service. You don't start out by setting up buying all the equipment for a massive, all the radio frequencies and, all the infrastructure for a big thing. You start out driving a cab. Then well, the station's profitable and the nightclubs aren't, or the other way around. You know the business on a small scale, and then you go a little bit larger. You have a couple of friends who are doing it with you, so you're now up at 3 cabs, and then you might have the scale to get the license for the the radio, and so on. Do you see? But you don't start out with a big thing. So the mistake they made was one of them, the third, the other area that wasn't good was actually trying to start out too big with this limited company. I said, you don't need that for a bit of eBay trading. You need limited companies when you're taking big risk and you want to limit your liability. Well, when you're trading computer games, there aren't many ways of losing your shirt. You see what I mean? Right? You might have bought a duff game, but it's got to be appropriate for scale. So I think that was, Mark was very clear on that. The one I did save them from was buying a house together, or buying a flat in a. Oh, you're coming back to that one, are you? No. Renting a house together and committing themselves to sort of big money, on the rental. That I was saying, but hang on, you're not supposed to be in Milton. You're supposed to be at Leicester at university. Mark at one point was talking of living at home or sort of commuting to uni at Leicester. Anyway, so okay, so that's the third one. Don't run ahead of yourself. Do it stage and scale at a time. Okay. So, if you think you're starting something, I think there are 2 fundamental questions to ask at the outset. The first one is, what are you good at? And the second one is, what do you enjoy? Right? So, the what are you good at question, it has subsets of, what specific skills do you have? what experience do you have? What contacts do you have? So skills, experience, contacts. Right? I always used to, by the way, be very conscious of the skills side. I used to underplay how important the contacts are. Okay, so Pastor Great talked to me of one or two of his ventures that he was thinking of, and one of them, one of them was about transport to airports and so on. I think the problem is there are low barriers to entry. Okay, so barriers to entry are it's easy for other people to get into the market, right? All they need to do is buy a car, right? Whereas, for example, oil and gas drilling, you need a few hundred million to buy a drilling rig or hire a drilling rig, right? It's a completely different order of magnitude, right? So you've got to think about if it's easy for everybody else to do it, what that actually means is that the profits get competed down. Okay, so there aren't so many opportunities. Does that make, yeah? Because other people can step in. If you suddenly start making a lot of money driving cabs, for example, well, other people just start very quickly. It's easy for them to get into the market. Yeah. So your ideal is something with high barriers to entry. That's either because you've got skills, or you've got contacts, or you've got experience. So when Pastor Great started talking about actually one of the other possibilities was immigration advice, I was thinking, yeah, that's a much better prospect. And the reason is, let's say he's competing against me. I can, buy a car, hire a car or whatever and compete taking people to the airport, but I don't have the contacts in Nigeria or other African countries who are interested in coming over or who have come over and are looking for advice and so on. Right? I just don't have those contacts. So he's got what's called a competitive advantage. Right? There's something he can do that I can't. So there's a bit about skills, but I could probably compete on the skills. I could probably go and do a course or something and find out how to do immigration advice. But what I can't compete on is the contacts. Right? So one of the things you're looking for is, what are the things where you've got a combination of skills or experience or contacts, right, that give you a head start that other people find it more difficult to match, right? So trading games on eBay, very, very, very low barriers to entry. Right, you only need a tenner to buy the next game, and you can hopefully resell it for 15. Yeah, it's easier to get into than even the taxi driving. Okay, right. So so Mark has got to be sort of a step ahead of the game all the time to make money that way. Whereas actually, if you're in an area where there isn't much competition, right, either because it's you've got the 100 million for the oil rig and there aren't too many other people with that, or you've got skills or contacts, right? So now the skills are easier for other people to acquire, right? They can also do the, immigration advice training course. But the contacts, I've got no chance. Do you see? Okay? So that's a particular one that gives people an advantage. So think about what you're good at, and also think about what you enjoy. Right? And the reason that's important is that if you do things that you hate, you won't last the long haul with it. You'll just get so fed up with it. Right? So I have a younger brother who is extremely well off. Right? He earns a 7-figure sum a year because he's a partner in a very big accountancy firm. Okay? He's actually a lawyer and he does tax advice on tax havens and so on. But he has always hated his job. Right? It's not what he wants to do with his life, but it makes so much money that he puts up with it. But that's what. But I see these sort of partners in these big law and accountancy firms. Very often they give up when they're 45, 50, right? Because they're just had enough of it. They don't need the money anymore. They've got plenty of money, but they just can't stand what they're doing, right? Okay. So if you want to do something for the long haul, you've also got to think about what you enjoy. Right? So do you enjoy sitting in an office giving, immigration advice, or do you prefer to be out, whether it's digging gardens or driving cabs or whatever. You know, think about the things that you can do for the long haul. You know, what do you like? Do you like cooking? You know, do you have a skill that could turn that into a business? Yeah. So I think of a lady I came across very recently who's she's Ghanaian, and she wants to run she is running cookery courses for people in Milton Keynes. Now, there will be other people who can do that, but at least the market is more limited. I can't do that type of cooking, right? Okay, right. But because she has a passion about that, she'll find it easier to keep that going. Okay, all right. So think about what you're good at. Think about what you enjoy. So Mark talked about enjoying making money, buying and selling. You know, you like the small scale wheeler dealering. Yeah, you know, I find a pack of computer games on a car boot scale that I know that 2 of them are useless, but 5 of them, you know, I bought the pack for 10 quid, and 5 of them I can sell for 8 quid each. You know, I'm going to make 40 quid out of that, right? You know that, yeah. So, yeah. So go for it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Let me talk about starting a new company. Oh, sorry, I had a third one. Yeah, sorry. What are you good at? What do you enjoy? And the other thing you've got to think through is how might you make money from what you enjoy? Right? So it's all very well enjoying Ghanaian cooking. Right? Yeah? Okay. But can you see a market that you can get into? Right? So, for example, you might choose to do that as a wedding business. Right? You know, you're looking for weddings where people may pay good money for, you know, cooking there. You might want to teach people, as this lady wanted to do, how to use the ingredients you can get on the supermarket shelves, but these days, but nobody knows, or not so many people know how to use them properly. Okay, so think about how you might make money in that area, and what you particularly want is things where you've either got a skill that other people haven't got, or you've got something that makes it more difficult for other people to get into that market. Right? I've got these lovely secret recipes that nobody else knows, right? Doesn't matter how good they are at the Ghanaian cookery, they don't know what my grandmother taught me, so I have there we are. You have a competitive advantage. You have something that other people don't have access to. And if it really is a good recipe, right, then you've got some prospects. Okay? But it's not just what people tend to overrate is they see what they like doing, and they think, you know, how they might make money from that area. But there are other skills you need to make it happen, right? So let me move on to starting a new company, right? You know, and starting a new business doesn't have to be as formal as a company. Okay. So some questions you need to ask yourself. First of all, what gaps are there in the market? Right? You know, at the moment, for example, I wouldn't advise going and doing sort of private hire, you know, cabs, right? The market's in the doldrums, and you only have to go down the station and see how many 100 of them are queued up. Right? Now the whole place is log jammed. You know, there ain't a lot of money to be made in that area at the moment. Okay, so you're looking for gaps in the market. Nobody's thought of doing, you know, weddings with this particular theme, or okay, you know, you're looking for something that other people don't have, right? Sometimes it might be, hang on, I've got an idea. I need a training room. I can do a deal with Pastor Great about using this on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever. So sometimes it's not even that your idea is unique. Your location or your opportunity is unique because you're the one who managed to sew up this place. You know, book it for a Tuesday afternoon, and you know it's now too late for anybody else to get in there. You see? Okay. So what gaps are there in the market? Right. The next thing to think about is, why hasn't someone else filled them? Right? So try and think through. So it may be because actually nobody's smart enough to have spotted it. But it might be there's a very good reason. Right? So if you suddenly think, hang on, they've been drilling for oil and gas in the North Sea for years, but, you know, nobody's done it in the English Channel yet. Right? Well, the fact that you've had the idea doesn't mean you're in a position to go straight in and try that one, right? Because you then suddenly realise, oh dear, I don't have a spare 100 million or whatever it takes to get into that. So you've got to think about why hasn't someone else done it yet, right? Okay. Now the trouble with that one is the best way of doing that is to ask advice. But if it really, really is a good idea, you don't want to be telling everybody else first. So you want to try and sort of talk around it to try and find out why might, is that a possibility? Have I spotted something that other people have missed? Okay. My grandfather owned a garage in the very early days of motoring, and it was on the Otley Road into Leeds, in the north of England. And this was back in the sort of the 1920s, and the trams came along. In fact, it was earlier than that. I think it was nearer 1910. And the trams came along, and they wanted his site for the tram depot because they wanted to be on the into Leeds side of the street, so they could just come straight out to the depot and then head off down the road into Leeds. Right. So when they built the tram system, they wanted to buy his garage. Right. So what did he do? He sold them the site. He bought the field on the other side of the road. It was before the days of planning laws. He just moved across the road, right? So he made money from his old site, but there was something else he'd spotted. People didn't buy petrol as they arrived in Leeds, right? Because he was on the into Leeds side of the road, right? What was happening was that, because there were lots of garages in Leeds, so you could always get more petrol. But when you left the town, you were heading out into the country, and in the early days of motoring, you couldn't be sure that you'd make it to the next petrol station before you ran out. Okay? So he realised that most people bought on leaving town, so he was better off on the other side of the road. So he both made money by selling the tram depot and then made money by being on a better site afterwards. Right? I've realised 50 years on that probably paid for my education as well, because he then died, left it to his daughters, and but all because he spotted a gap in the market, right? The market was better leaving town, and he better shift across the road before somebody else had the smart idea of buying the field opposite him, and driving him out of business because they'd got the better site. Okay, so think out, yeah, what are those opportunities on? Next one to think out is, what's your business model? Okay, so how are you aiming to make money? What are you aiming to do? So are you in this for the short term or the long term? Right? Are you aiming to, is your strategy, let's go back to that minicab thing. Is your aim to drive a minicab because that's what you love doing, right? And you cope with all the queues at the railway station. Or is your aim to hold the license to, and the radio license, so that you actually control a little network of cars and so on? What are you building towards, right? And the reason that's important is that let's say your aspiration is the radio license and the larger thing, well, you've also got to think okay, I need the skills, so driving a cab for a while would be a good idea, but also I need I'm going to need some money. You have to pay for the license. You have to pay that out before you get any money back. You see, so you've got to start putting in place the bits that enable the larger scale. Right? To give you a church example that Pastor Great and I have talked through, I talk to churches that aspire to the sort of the size of building we have, but the thing is, it's almost impossible to go straight to that. What we had was a smaller building first that we sold for $250,000. Right? That $250,000 provide a dirty great deposit, right, that enable us to get a mortgage for the balance to buy a much bigger building. Nobody's going to give you a 100% mortgage, but they will give you a smaller mortgage. Do you see? Okay. So sometimes, you've got to think what your big picture long-term aim is, so that you can step towards it. And if you're working with other people, right, as Mark's lessons, point out, you've got to be very clear. What are we aiming at? Right? If they aspire to run, the taxi network in Milton Keynes, and you aspire to drive a cab, right? The partnership's going to come apart in a while, because they'll say, "Come on, why aren't you moving on to bigger things?" And you're saying, "I'm happy driving my cab." Yes. Okay, so clarity on that. Okay. The other thing is, get as much advice as you can. So ask people in the type of market you're thinking of. So for example, we own another property that we let out, and we have a friend in Milton Keynes who owned a number of properties and let them out, and he was there first. And I said to him, what are the things I should watch out for? And he said, whatever you do, make sure that the properties are local to where you live, right? And the reason is that if they're a long way away and you have a problem, you just can't get to sort it out, right? And I know someone in the leadership team of another church who bought a property in Leeds and a property in Durham and let them out. And the one in Leeds, the tenants were so awful that not only did they wreck the place, they sold all the furniture and they sold the floorboards. So when he got it back, the place was just stripped, beyond stripped, he had to pay to get it back to the basics, right? If he'd been on the spot, and he knew a few of the neighbours and so on, somebody might have said, oh, by the way, I've just seen, I've seen the furniture disappearing, right? He might have been onto it before the floorboards disappeared, right? Okay. So the friend's advice was make sure, it's local. So, that will make life much easier for you. Yeah. So ask around so that you get advice as to, that one stacks up. So, when Pastor Great asked me about the couple of possibilities I just suggested, I said, I can immediately see more opportunity in the immigration area than driving people to the airports, right? And I had a good reason why, because the barriers to entry for other people are much higher, right? Okay, so ask lots of people, and they'll tell you things like, well, hang on, there are hundreds of people trying to do, I don't know, food for weddings, right? The market's got loads of people in it at the moment, or whatever. Okay, right. Okay. If you can, test out your ideas on a smaller scale before you move to larger scale, right? So it's a bit like Mark with computer games. You start small and you build up, but so try it. Don't commit yourself to big stuff like, I don't know, promising Amazon you're going to sell at least £1,000 worth of stuff a month, right? Not they require that, but you want to see how it goes stage by stage. Okay. Think about what skills you're missing. So it's not enough to know how to trade or work in your area. Do you know how to set up the business? Do you know the legal and operational rules for your area? Okay. So. If you're getting into, I don't know, something that involves cooking, do you know the health and safety rules? Right? I'll give you an example. I've got a friend, in fact, one of the leaders in my church, who does a lot of book selling, right? And he keeps coming across people who want to print books, right? But they print them without barcodes. If you haven't got a barcode on it, you can't sell it except sort of personally. I can sell it to my friend, but nobody will stock it because the barcode is the thing that makes it quick and easy. And there is actually there's an organisation that sort of does the barcodes relatively cheaply, but you have to know that that's how you do it. Okay? So, do you have the project management skills to get your business going? Okay, so something involves quite a bit of organising. So you might be great at cooking and at teaching people to cook, but you might need someone else to help you, find the premises, organise the classes, take the money for the lessons and so on, right? You might need someone else to do the little bit that's really not you. You can do 90% of it, but there's a bit that's really not you. Okay. The most important one in that area, I think, is the marketing skills. So I think of a guy that I know well, in our church, who's actually very good at the IT, okay, and he runs a business in that area. Trouble is, he hates marketing it, right? So he starts off with one or two customers, and he works very hard to keep those customers, but he finds it very difficult to get any new customers because he just loathes marketing, right? And I know I also hate marketing. I just hate cold calling. I just can't stand it. I take it as a personal rejection when they say, no, thank you, And if you have to have 99 of those for every one that says yes, and I feel an awful lot of rejection, right? I keep having to remind myself, no, it's not me they're rejecting, it's the, whatever. But it's because I struggle with that, and disassociating it from a personal rejection. Marketing is not for me. So if I were to get into an area of business, I've got to do it jointly with other people who have expertise in that. In fact, there's a guy in the church he does marketing for construction companies, right? And he sells his services. He's freelance, and he sells it to 5 different people for 5 different days of the week, right? And of course, all these construction companies are not doing well at the moment, so they keep one drops him, and then he picks up another one because he's good at the marketing. He can always find another one, right? Because he's good at selling himself to them, right? And one of the things I suggested to the IT guy was, okay, this guy can market anything, right? He loves the cold calling. He'll do 100 calls a day, no problem, right? Okay, so why don't you get together with him and just do a deal? Okay, neither of you's got spare cash, but you do a deal that for every new customer that comes through this marketing guy, the marketing guy will get 25 or 30 or 50% of the money, right? Because the IT guy's got spare days in the week, right? By working together, the marketing guy's got no IT skills. He couldn't do the work. The IT guy needs the marketing person to get in the business, right? So it's find the partners, and the really important thing is got to be people you trust. Right, yeah, and be clear, as we talked with Mark earlier. Be clear about the deal, right? So are they going to get 25%? Don't go into it saying, well, if you get me some business, I'll share a bit of it with you, because you'll always end up with a mismatch of, he thought you meant 50-50, and you thought you meant he was going to get 10%, right? Well, it doesn't matter if it's 10% or 50%. Just agree it up front, right? Okay, right. I've got 10 stages in starting and developing a company. Number 1, dream. Dream. Think about what you love doing. Dream. Number 2, define. So, we dream about cooking all the time. Well, are we talking about cookery classes, or cookery books, or cooking for weddings, or cooking for other events? So define it more precisely, right? And you don't just drift into it generally. You say, no, I'm going to write a book. I've got 47 recipes lined up. That's more than enough. I'll choose the best 30. Yeah, okay. Is it that you're going after, or is it the classes, or is it the doing the work, whatever? So define it. Okay. Next one, design. So dream, define, then design. Okay, so we're going to do cookery classes. Well, how are we going to do that? Are we going to do it daytime? We're going to do evening? What's the market? What's the group we're after? Design it, more. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, work out. So who are we after? And make sure there is a market there. Yeah, I'm after all those 18-year-old men who love to learn Ghanaian cookery. No. We all know that's a non-starter, right? Yeah. Okay. So dream, define, design. Number 4, depart. You started off. You depart. You give it a go. But better if you can, start small. Right? So you're not committing too much too quickly. It develops over time. Number 5, discover. Oh dear. I thought all the customers would come rolling in. But in 3 of the 4 areas I was after, I haven't got any customers. But I have got a number of people in that area. So you discover, what I was after, it works. It's got some movement, some momentum in that area. Right? I'm getting all the old grannies to come along to my cookery classes, but no one else. Yeah? So maybe I should be concentrating on the grannies or whatever it is. Okay? So so you discover the bit that didn't quite work. Number 6, we'll stick with D's. Sometimes we have to be a bit creative. How about you? Dislodge the problem. otherwise known as find a solution. Okay, so only the grannies were signing up. How do I get the young mums to sign up as well? Okay, So number 6, dislodge the problems, find the solutions. Number 7, do it. Right, go for the activity. As as you find out, okay, you're getting a bit of progress in this area, then just go for it, do it. Right. Number 8, develop it. So that's refining what you have. Okay. So you develop it further. You're having great success with the older people, but now we're developing how do we apply that to the young mums and so on. Okay. Number 9 is deploy it. That really means roll it out on a larger scale. Okay. So I've got a friend who runs a driving instructor. He's a driving instructor, and he found that his techniques were getting extremely high pass rates. Okay? So he could deploy it, he could roll it out by actually getting other people to use. I think at one point he said he hadn't had a failure in 18 months. I think his strategy was don't put them in for the test until he's sure they're going to pass. but what he ended up with was 2 or 3 other people doing the same thing. Right? Deploy it. Okay? But what he then found was that actually running the business of these 3 or 4 people bored him to death. All right? And he ended up handing over the business to the rest of them and saying, oh, you get on with it. Right? Okay. Because it was just so much not him. But because he didn't overcommit himself, so he didn't take out a massive bank loan, he's now tied up with running a business and he's got to keep paying the bank back and so on, so that he's locked in. Right? Because he develops it steadily, he managed to find out about himself that actually managing other people, oh no, not for him. Right? So he's learned something about himself and he stopped himself getting into false areas. So deploy it. Right? So you do it on a larger scale, but you find out what your limits are. And then number 10, do it better. Right? So, let me put that a different way, a simplified cycle, rather than these 10 Ds: dream, define, design, depart, discover, dislodge problems, do it, develop it, deploy it, and then do it better. Right? There's a simpler way of thinking of it is plan, do, review. Right? So you set up your cookery classes, you find the old ladies sign up, no one else. Right? So you've planned it, you've done it, now you're reviewing it. So why did nobody else sign up? Was it because I got the wrong time of day? Was it if I provided a creche, all the young mums would come along? Right? What? Okay, you know what? So it's plan, do, review. Okay, so there's a cycle, and then you review. That gives you adjustments, so you plan those adjustments, do it, review it. So that's a continuous cycle. Plan, do, review. Okay? Right. I feel the need for... You got a story? I've got a bit more before next story for you. You got a story ready, or do you want to... Should I go a little bit more longer? I've got one more section then. Okay? Being your own boss. I see far too many small business owners who are far too self-indulgent. They so enjoy the idea of being their own boss. They don't really develop the business properly. So I think of the friend, you know who this was, who a few years back, he got made redundant by his company and had quite a good payoff. So and he was an IT specialist, and he decided to set up in the IT world, right? And so, do you know what the first thing action was? Very first thing he bought, very first thing he did? He bought himself a BMW 5 Series car, brand new. Right? Why? Because he thought, well, all the customer, if I turn up in a big car, all the customers will think I'm really successful, they really want to do business with them. Actually, my reaction to something in the BMW 5 Series is they're probably rather expensive and I want a cheaper solution. But anyway, that's... so his first reaction was... do it on a... It had nothing whatsoever to do with the business, marketing or developing the business. It was sort of, let's look good. Yeah? So the bank would lend him some money and he got a payoff from his previous company and he just blew it on a BMW 5 Series thinking that would really help his business. Yeah? My next point was about self-discipline. And you told me you got a story on that one.
Yeah. Self-discipline. This was quite an interesting one for me, I found, when I was back at university. basically, so as I was saying, I was doing it kind of alongside my uni course. Now, I generally find, and it's still the same today, I work better in the evenings. So what I planned to do was, I thought, hey, great, this worked great. I can do my uni course through the day, and then I'll get to the evening, and come 9 or 10 p.m, I'll start working on this business, and I'll do whatever I need to do in the evening, and I'll be absolutely fine. Problem is, first of all, I didn't really think it through. And this kind of links back to this whole planning and clarity in what you're doing. That's a fine idea, but when it takes you sort of 3 or 4 hours to complete it in the evening, suddenly I was going to bed at sort of 2, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, and then if I have a lecture in the following morning at 9 a.m, suddenly I've slept through that, and it's now impacting on my uni course. Things are getting all kind of messed up. So that was kind of a bit about planning. But also I found, at uni in the evenings, people did things till kind of 12, 1 in the morning, and you just kind of hang out with people, and suddenly that decision to kind of not do that and kind of focus on business and getting this thing done was kind of a really tricky thing for me. It is kind of really important to be self-disciplined. This is the plan, this is what you're doing, this is when I'm going to do it. As soon as you kind of start moving away from that, it starts causing you problems. Not meeting targets, not meeting deadlines. The other problem I found was that post offices are generally not open at 3 in the morning. Funny that. Once you've kind of packaged all your items up and you're ready to take it to the post office, well, they're not open. So that kind of whole planning and it's very important. That was kind of the main point on that.
So we've now spotted a gap in the market. If anybody wants to open a post office that's open at 3 in the morning, Mark will be round there with his parcels. Okay. So there's something about self-discipline. There's something about, and that has to include your time management. Okay. The thing is, all these things are choices, right? You don't want to be someone who's just become so driven by business that all you do is, that all day long. So you don't socialise, you don't do your uni work, you don't do anything. You have to make the choices. So, am I going to do the business 3 nights a week, 5 nights a week, or whatever? Right? Mark did get into trouble more recently with. He was getting somebody else to do some of the packaging up, right? And he found that he actually got marked down on eBay rather badly because this other lad wasn't packaging things up and sending them off to the timescales that he'd agreed with Mark. So he thought, I can do it in a few days' time, right? And then they started to get bad feedback, and then that actually got them into trouble on eBay, and because that escalates. What that then meant was that they ended up being restricted as to how much business they could do on eBay. So he moved to Amazon. So sometimes there are solutions to these things, but you make a poor call earlier, and you find it sort of catches up with you later on. So you need that self-discipline, but that doesn't mean you just invest all your time in one area, neglect the family, forget the kids, and so on. You've got to think those things out. What can you afford to do? Okay, so some types of work require long hours to make a success of it. Some you can pick up and put down. I suspect that the best way of doing cab driving is actually just do the peak times, right? You do the morning rush hour, the evening rush hour, and the Friday and Saturday nights, and that's it, right? Because there's always a shortage then, and the rest of the time you're just standing in queues. Yeah. Okay. So think about what it takes to be a success in your market. I made a decision when I was leaving university. I was not interested in merchant banking, and the reason is even 30 years ago, and it's got much worse since. But even 30 years ago, they worked the socks off you. It was sort of that was your life. You did nothing else. You had no life. I wanted to serve God, follow him, and I wanted space for that. I did not want to spend 20 years earning a packet of money and then I can do whatever I like with my life. Yeah, I wanted my life to be more continuous in my ability to love and serve God practically and not be so shattered that I was no good for it. Okay. Being your own boss, there's also, you do need some ability to work with people, right? There aren't many lines of work that don't involve any interaction. So you have to be able to deal with people effectively. You also need to understand finance sufficiently. So what does it take to get your area of work up and running? Some of those things you can get from other people. You may be great at your area of interest, the thing you're going to do in your business, but no good as sort of bookkeeping and so on. But what you've got to do is have a partner or have a bookkeeper or someone, or have enough money for that at the outset so you don't get in a mess. Right? Otherwise you find people are just sort of playing catch up the whole time, and your business goes up under just because the business is very sound. But it gets in a mess because you didn't think of paying the tax or whatever, or keeping the money for the VAT or the tax or whatever it is. Right? You have to. So, and the thing is, there are limits to how much you can work on your weaknesses, right? The best way is not to try and solve all your weaknesses. The best thing is to go for your strengths and work in a team where other people cover your weaknesses, right? So your ideal bookkeeper is probably the one who will take a share of the profits rather than sort of charges you an absolute sum. So they're in it as well, and they'll make a bit more money if it does well, and a bit less if it doesn't do so well. But not easy to find a bookkeeper willing to do that sort of thing. But okay. But you see what I mean? So I'm not saying that you have to be, if you're not great on finance, well, the important thing is recognise you're not great in finance and find a workaround, find someone else who can cover that from you. Don't try and do something that is really just not you. Okay. You've also got to think about, access to capital, right? So don't try and you're not going to go into the oil drilling business unless you're, Paul Getty's grandson and got a spare 100 million, right? Yeah, so think about your business and actually, is it realistic? I may have the skills, I may have the contacts, but if I don't have the access to capital, right, that's whatever the level is for that, then you might have to look some other way of doing it, right? Okay, and count the cost. Count the cost. Right, work out the consequences for your time, your money, your life of the things that you're thinking of doing. Mark's going to tell us about counting the costs in terms of relationship with his best friend.
Costs and consequences. So as we discussed before, how kind of everything kind of fell apart with the business. I found that, originally I just thought there was going to be a bit of kind of financial hit, and it kind of may cost me a bit of money in the short term. What I didn't envisage was kind of the kind of knock-on effects on everything that this was going to affect. So, for example, even now, a couple of years down the line, I'm finding things like accountancy fees that I have to kind of pay a little bit each year for up to 5 years, because that's the law. Those sort of things I just kind of hadn't counted the cost and are now a consequence of what was happening. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other big one, of course, as Richard was saying, was the relationship with my best friend. The problems that we encountered kind of almost destroyed our relationship for a good kind of 6 months or so, and it was quite painful. This guy, best friend for best part of 7 or 8 years, suddenly encountering these problems, it all kind of falls apart, and I lost kind of a best friend for it. Fortunately, since then, it's kind of we've patched things up and doing a lot better, and it's all going much better now. But it was a painful time. something else on there as well. I think this is kind of all kind of a testament to, you know, kind of I'll think about kind of planning and clarity and you know, making sure you get things right. But you know, at the end of the day, I think one of the most important things that I found for the whole experience was you're going to make mistakes. You know, you're going to make you know, you're going to do things wrong. You know, I look back on the mistakes that I made, and I think, oh, I've done that so differently now. But I can't stress how important it is to learn from those mistakes. You know, do not be afraid to, Richard touched on it right at the start. Do not be afraid to kind of you know, fail and then learn from of those things. You know, I was talking about those entrepreneurs who kind of fail 6 or 7 times. If you've got that attitude of, you know, oh, I failed, oh, I'm no good at this, so I'm going to give up, then, you know, you're not going to get to that stage where that entrepreneur finally gets to that point where he's got that idea and it all comes together. You know, you've got to be willing to keep going, keep trying, and you know, I think it's a bit of a character thing as well. It's one of the things that I've found through this whole process. You know, counting the cost, it's actually built my character. There's things I've learnt that I would have never learnt kind of through this, and I'm glad I learnt it with kind of a few thousand and kind of tens of thousands later on in life. But yeah, it really does build character in terms of how you bounce back from those issues.
I've got one final bit, which is I'm going to give you 7 principles from Luke's Gospel on handling business and building business. And then I think it's really, I'd be very happy to sort of take questions and do it a bit interactively, but I also think, I know you've got time limits, so you decide what and so on. You know, I'm very happy to do that. So here are just 7 quick principles for building as a Christian. Okay, so building as a kingdom investor, someone who is committed to the kingdom of God and committed to working to build that kingdom. So, number 1, build with kingdom purpose. So I'll give you a reference for each of these. Luke 5:4, you know, that's put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Jesus demonstrated the kingdom of God. My purpose in life is to build the kingdom. Right? I will do other things like, I don't know, invest in property to make money that enables me to sow into the kingdom. Right? We're taking a couple of lodges at the moment. It's just a means of raising extra money, some of the things that we're sowing into the kingdom. So think about your purpose, and I would always encourage you to build with kingdom purpose, Luke 5:4. Okay, number 2, use well the talents you have been given. So use well the talents you've been given. Luke 19:11 to 26, that's the parable of the talents. As I read the Bible, my understanding is that when we stand before God at the end of time, there's a 2-stage judgment. The first stage is, do you know him? Do you know him? Do you know Jesus? And, you know, will you be joining him forever or not? Okay, or will you go to eternal separation from him? But the second stage judgment is, and okay, if you knew him, how did you use what he gave you? Right? So I think of people who probably don't have as many natural gifts as I have, but I look at them and I think you are really using every last ounce that God has given you. And actually, as I read that, you know, I think, and that means that I expect God to give you sort of, you know, a bigger well done and bigger reward than me, who, you know, might have more gifts in the natural, but I'm not using them as well, right? So use what you have very, very well, right? Use well the talents you have. Luke 19:11 to 26. Right? Number 3, count the cost. And I get that from Luke 14:28 to 30. Luke 14:28 to 30, and that's the parable of building the tower. You know, If you start out building a tower and you don't have the money to finish it, everybody laughs at you. Okay, so count the cost first, right? So that's number 3. Count the cost, Luke 14, 28 to 30. Number 4, take advice and build well. Luke 6, 46 to 49. That's the wise and the foolish builders. So the man building a house who dug deep and laid foundation on the rock, when the flood came, he was fine. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice, so the ones who don't listen, don't learn, is like the man who built a house on a ground without foundation, the one who built on sand. So take advice and build well, right? One of the things I found really great about Pastor Gray is that actually he seeks advice from everybody. You've still got then the problem and the judgment. Okay, they tell me opposite things to do. Which one's right? You still have to weigh it and make the decision yourself. But the more advice you've got, the more chance you have of getting it spot on. Okay, so that's number 4. Take advice and build well. That's Luke 6, 46 to 49. Number 5. Oh, by the way, also on that one, expect anything good to take a long time to build. Did you notice the guy who was building a house, who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock? That takes time and effort. Right? Much easier to build it on the sand. I'll just slap it up where it is. Okay? So expect anything good to take a long time to build. If it's a get-rich-quick scheme, it won't last. Okay? Number 5. Build with eternity in mind. So that's Luke 12, 16 to 21. And that's the story, the parable of the man with the barns, who tears down his barns, builds bigger ones, and God requires his life of him that night. So live rich towards God. Build with eternity in mind. Okay, Luke 12, 16 to 21. That was number 5. Number 6, be a wise steward. That's Luke 12, 42 to 48. The Lord answered, who then's the faithful and wise manager, whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. And then at the back end of that it says, the servant who knows his master well and does not get ready or does not do what his master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So be a wise steward of what God has entrusted with you. That's probably the main thing I think of when I think of finances. Am I stewarding what God's given me well? Okay. And then the final one is depend on God through it all. Okay, depend on him through it all. That's Luke 12, 22 and 27 to 31. So Luke 12, 22. Jesus said to his disciples, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Verse 27, consider how the lilies grow. They do not labour or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendour was dressed like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? Okay. Seek his kingdom and these things will be given to you as well. Okay? So, and that's really the point on which I want to end, because you think about your purpose. You know, if you're going out in business and you're going to develop those things, think about why are you doing them. I do hope and trust it's to build the kingdom of God and to depend on him faithfully through it all. So let me pray. Father, I do pray for all these lovely people. I pray that as they think about all the things that they can use their time and their talents and their contacts and their experience in, I pray that you will just prompt them in terms of the ones that that one's for me. That one's for me now. I pray that just after this evening you'll give them thoughts of the areas that you want them to develop. And also in the other direction, Father, the things where they actually need to be cutting back, where they're doing too much already and actually they need to invest differently, more wisely, more measured, with more of a plan. Help them to know what you want, what is your good and glorious will for each of these people to love you, to know you, to love the Lord their God with all their heart and soul and mind and strength, and to be wise stewards of all the riches and talents and contacts and experience that you've given them. In Jesus' name, amen.
It is of a great joy to know that you are being transformed by the Word of God that you have listened to. For inquiries, prayer support or counselling, call Greater Works office or email admin@healersbiblechurch.com or visit our website www.healersbiblechurch.com. The order of your life is glory.